G'day everyone, Julian Carroll here from Black Star Angus. I've just been crunching my data, my HeiferSELECT data, and have kind of brought it out of angus.tech and into a spreadsheet to look at it a little bit differently. And I thought, hey, maybe I should share this with other people. Not even for just looking at HeiferSELECT, but processing or querying a large data set. As a cattle breeder, I find this technique really useful for the querying EBVs, finding suitable mates, looking at progeny from a particular angle, and processing or looking at the raw scores that I've kept on in my own databases. So what we're going to do today is basically use a spreadsheet as a database and use the query function as a means of pulling out the data from the data set that we want. It's a pretty cool function. It's my favourite function in a spreadsheet, and it's probably a little bit more advanced, but it's not too hard to follow, and we'll keep it pretty simple. At the end, if you want to grab a copy of my spreadsheet, you can, and adapt it for your own purposes. We'll do a little bit on conditional formatting, and we'll also look at the data on angus.tech. So come along and enjoy the ride. Cheers. So this is logged into angus.tech. The HeiferSELECT data is hidden up here in angus.select. We drop down that menu. There we go. Cool. So if I just hit the search button, that's just going to bring out all the data that is in my herd. So there we go. There's 106 results, about 6 pages. So if we wanted to go through and filter this list and pick out the replacements from this list, then I suggest you just do that in angus.tech. We can basically, if we look at this search criteria here, change the search. We can actually put some parameters around these predictions. Let's rule out the bottom of the calving ease direct. Let's pull out the bottom of the yielding weight. Let's crunch that worst performance in the mature cow weight, for example. Let's have a look at what that result looks like. Search. Now, so instead of 106 results, I've now got 92 results. So that's really good for building a list of the heifers I want to retain. But I kind of want to look at it in reverse. How do I choose the heifers I want to cull from my mob and mark it as surplus? There's no real way of doing that in angus.tech because angus.tech filtering basically is a logical expression with lots of ands. So show me heifers with good calving ease and good yielding weight and low mature cow weight. What I want to say is show me any heifer with bad calving ease or bad mature cow weight or bad IMF. And that's a different logical expression that's using ors instead of ands, and we can't do that in angus.tech. So what we're going to do is pull that data into a spreadsheet. So let's go back a step and edit our search criteria, and we're going to clear what we were putting before and search again. So we're back to our full results, 106. Now we're going to go over to the report center. Now in the report center, we're going to use this CSV export. But before we do that, I want to just show you this trait distribution. And this is a really useful graph here. This is a histogram. So for any given trait, like calving ease direct, we're going to get a histogram, and they're normally shaped. They've not got a hump in the middle and outliers at either end. Usually most of your animals, let's choose something pretty conventional like IMF. You kind of have this hill shape where most of your animals will sit in the middle, and you get these fewer outliers at either end of the curve. So when we're making selection decisions, we kind of want to pick these animals and omit them from our selection of replacement heifers. Now by clicking on those two bars, you can see I get a list down the bottom here. If that's the 11 to 20 decile, the 21 to 30 decile. If I also click on the 31 to 40 decile, I've now selected all of these animals. To deselect, just click anywhere in the background of the graph. So I could do this for each trait. I could actually go and say, okay, well, let's grab yielding weight and let's grab the heifers in that group. There's one we don't want. And let's also go and grab the ones at mature cow weight at the other end. So for mature cow weight, let's select these crazy ones here. Oops, I'm just going to select the background to deselect. That one. Maybe I could select all of those too. But then I'm going to have heifers that fall into more than one category, and I've got to deduplicate, and it's a little bit messy. I'll lose count of how many heifers I've actually decided to cull. So what we're actually going to do is we're going to go back to our results, and I'm going to choose this search result listing in CSV. Before we do that, there's one more thing we've got to do, and that's make sure that we've got all of the data turned on. So in this report, we've got most of the columns showing, but we don't have all of the columns showing. We've got these layouts, default layout. Here's one I created earlier called Essentials, which narrows it down to just these ones that I'm interested in. Let's customize the results layout, and we'll get everything we need. So I don't really need the animal name because I've got the animal ID. They don't have names in HeiferSELECT. What I want is, I don't want test request date result available. I just want these ones: calving ease, yielding weight, mature cow weight, total breeding value is the one that was missing in my other screen I'm on. I want eye muscle area. I want rib fat and IMF. And that's pretty much going to do me. I'm just going to move total breeding value to the very end by clicking this down arrow. And otherwise the rest of those are fine in that order. So now I've got the data I want. Let's go to the report center again. Just got to save that layout. Let's save layout as I'll call it export data. We'll be able to use that again in the future. So let's go to the report center, search result listing, see the job run, file down here. Now I can just click this and that's going to open in Excel. So if you like to work in Excel, then you'll be able to follow along with what I'm doing. I'm sure it'll all look the same. I actually like Google Sheets, so I'm just going to cut and paste this data. If your browser doesn't have it sitting at the bottom of the screen, then it's probably going to be sitting in your downloads folder. So I'm going to cut and paste that and go and jump into Google Sheets. Now I really like Google Sheets because all of these files or worksheets I create live in the cloud and I can access them anytime, anywhere on my phone. And that's really useful when I need to look at a piece of data when I'm in the cattle yards or in the paddock that I didn't think I needed, but ultimately have to go searching for it. So we're going to use Google Sheets, which basically does all the same things as Excel and has all the same functions. So I'm in cell A1, I'm just going to paste our data in there, and there it is. So rather than just jump in and edit the data on this sheet, this is just going to be, I guess, our source data. I'm going to rename it data just to reinforce that message that kind of like a database. This is where all the data sits, and we're going to pull data out of this that we need. So I'm going to add another sheet by clicking that plus button. So here I'm going to introduce the query formula. So we start any formula with an equal sign, and open our brackets. Here's our little tooltips that we see in Google Sheets. First thing we need is our data. So just while that formula is being written, I'm just going to jump into our data and grab A1. You just select all your data. There we go, H107, and hit the comma button because that's when we're ready for our query. So queries go in quotes. So I'm going to open my quotes and I'm going to say select A. And that's the simplest example of a query. I don't even have to put the third optional parameter. I'm just going to close the brackets and hit enter. And that's jumped us back over into our new sheet. I'm going to call this surplus. This is our list of surplus heifers. And it's basically said, give me everything from column A in our data spreadsheet. Now, if we look at our data spreadsheet, what we actually want is column A, B, C, D, E, F, G. I'm not going to bother with H for now. But let's select these other ones, A, B, C, D, E, F, G. You can skip any you want. If you had selected more columns over there but you didn't want to query them, then that's fine. And there you see it's basically imported all of that data over. So that's not really using the query function to our advantage. Where the query function gets cool is where we start to say, give it some conditions. So select all that data, but limit it to column B being less than or equal to 20. And now suddenly we've got a short list of results where column B, which is Carvingese Direct, is under 20. Now I've also got some rows here of animals with no data. One of those is where the DNA sample I submitted was no good. I can retest her and send her. And these three were where the neighbour's Wagyu bull got in, unfortunately. Not even Angus. They'll obviously get culled anyway, so that's fine for them to appear in this list. These bottom three were used by a sire that didn't have a DNA profile prior to him being resold. So they've got estimated breeding values for all the other traits, but just not Carvingese Direct. So we'll be mindful to see whether they only get listed in our cull list based on Carvingese Direct. Okay. Here's our query again. Let's build this out so we can add more conditions. And we talked about angus.tech being logical functions using only and. Our logical function is going to use or. C, column C, is less than or equal to 30. Hit enter. So now we've got a bigger list. How big's our list? Well, let's keep a tally on how big our list is over here. List size. Let's do another function here, which is count. Now, because these values we're going to count here aren't numeric, we need the count A function because they're strings. And I've just selected some, A3 to A23, just in case that list gets really big. I'll change that to 50. Okay, so I've got 13 out of 106. 12%. Good to know. So let's add some more criteria. Clicking back, so basically all of this data is just coming from this one cell that's in A2. And what we want to do is keep building this out. So we've done A, we've done B and done C. We want to do D. I'm going to hide this. I don't need the help anymore. And I just want to see our headings. So D is mature cow weight. Okay, so instead of less than or equal to, we want this one to be greater than or equal to. Anything that's bigger than 85, for example. And I'll talk to you about how to pick these numbers in a second. Or E is less than or equal to EMA, call that 15. Or F, which is rib fat, is less than or equal to 20. Not a big selection question item for me. One more, which is IMF, so that's G is less than or equal to, I'll put a bit more selection pressure on that. So you can see in our query we've now got all of these conditions joined with ORs. So where carving ease direct is less than or equal to 20, where yielding weight is less than or equal to 30, where mature cow weight is greater than or equal to 85, etc. It's going to hit enter. Okay, so now our list size has gone up to 26 or 25%. So everyone's going to have different numbers of heifers they want to retain depending on whether they're rebuilding or they need to retire a bunch of old cows. What that number that you want to select is up to you. But what we want to do now is just think about those values, our criteria, our cutoff values. So I'm just going to create a title here, criteria, do a quick bit of formatting, bold, just because I'm a bit of a neat freak. Cool. Criteria, carving ease direct. How do we decide what our criteria is for any of these? Well, let's go back to our histograms. This is back in HeiferSELECT. So again, I can look at this histogram and say, well, I can pretty easily lose the bottom 4. I could probably lose the bottom 8 on carving ease direct. Carving ease in a heifer, pretty important selection criteria that we don't have if we don't. It's a trait we really can take advantage of with HeiferSELECT, not one that we have when we're just selecting them with our polypipe. So I'm going to say, yeah, anything that's 30 or below, that's cull. So I'm going to put 30 up here. Yielding weight. Change this to yielding weight. Well, certainly I can lose one heifer in the 20th decile. Don't think I want to lose 13, although yielding weight is important. If I click on that 31 to 40 decile, let's have a bit of a look at the yielding weight scores. And I can see that there's one, if I just like, how many are low? There's probably half of them below. I could change that to, it doesn't have to be, to the 10. You can change that to 25. Mature cow weight, let's have a look at that one. Well, I certainly don't need the one heifer in the last decile. And maybe I can ditch those ones too. Select the background to deselect. Just get that one column selected and have a look at those. Well, it's pretty easy. I can just go for 85 and that'll just knock out, or 84, and that'll just knock out another 3. That's probably a good spot to be. Do the same for carcass EMA. So we want to probably knock out those ones with no muscling. That's probably going to do me, so select 10 as my cutoff. Rib fat. Maybe I'll just prune those bottom 4. So I'll select 20 as my cutoff. And IMF. I like to put a bit more selection pressure on IMF. So I'm going to run with 30. Prune off those bottom ones. So the idea of selecting the bottom end of our histogram is we're basically moving the average value for our herd, and that's a great way to make genetic progress. All right, so now we've got these criteria specified in these cells, but our query function has got these static values that we just wrote in our formula. So what I'm going to show you how to do now is to make these little bits inside our formula refer to those cells. And this is probably the trickiest or fiddliest bit, so you might want to pause the video as we go and watch this, but I'll step through each of our 6 criteria so you get the hang of it. So I'm just going to delete 20 because I'm going to replace that with the cell value. I'm going to replace that with what's in cell B1. So to do that, we're in this double quote string here, so we kind of have to jump out of that double quote string and join a piece of data with an ampersand, put our B1, join back to our string, and put the double quote back in to get back into it. I'm just going to hit enter now to test that, and I think we're good. The function's still working. So we can see where B equals jumping out of the double quotes, joining B1 into our string, jumping back into the double quotes. So we'll do that with all of them. B1, double quote, ampersand C1, ampersand, double quote, ampersand B1, ampersand, double quote. Just going to hit enter now just to test that we still, see we've broken something. So I know that I've probably done that in the last one, and there I put a dollar sign instead of an ampersand. So that's a good way of just feeling our way along, back in business. So E, we're doing double quote, ampersand, E1, ampersand, double quote. Nearly there, just got to do F and G. So F is double quote, ampersand, F1, ampersand, double quote, and last one, double quote, ampersand, G1, ampersand, double quote. Now you'll see at the end we've got 2 quotes in a row, and that's correct because we're kind of busting out of our quoted string and back into our quoted string. So it's entirely correct to see 2 double quotes at the end. Hit enter, happy days, we're all working. So what that means now is in here we can tweak these values and say, I've got a list of 27, 25%. I might want to just push the selection pressure up a bit higher and make that 30%. And then our list changes. We've only picked up 1 extra heifer, so that's pretty cool. What else can we crunch? I can say a little bit more selection pressure on EMA. Let's get the scores of 15 and below. Let's got us 1 extra heifer. Rib fat, I'm happy with that. I'm happy with 30. So what we've got now is these live values that basically inform our query. Looks pretty scary all of a sudden, but it's pretty logical. I reckon you've probably been able to follow along. Do a quick bit of formatting here. go. And so now we've got this pretty handy list of surplus heifers. What if you wanted to just really narrow down, is there any other heifers here we're culling that's a bit harsh just on their one single trait value? One of the things we can use is conditional formatting just to quickly highlight how many of these heifers have been knocked out on a number of different traits. Just going to select 40 rows in this column just because our list can grow up and down, so I'm just going to get 40 rows. And over here I'm going to say format conditional formatting. Okay, so by default it's basically just said format the cells that are empty. We're going to change this to format the cells that are less than or equal to. We could put 30 in there and give them a big dirty red colour to say here's our heifers that failed on the calving is direct criteria. But rather than 30, which we're kind of hardwiring into that conditional format rule, let's again reference the cell B1. And instead of putting the number 30, we can put a formula in there. So the key thing to remember is start with an equal sign to tell it it's a formula. And then we can put in B1. And that's kind of got us on the right path. But the problem is that that's telling it to look in the cell above. So we're getting some false hits here because it's basically referring to the cell above. If we force it to only look at the very first row by putting a $sign just in front of there, then we correct that. So now what we're seeing is the value in B1 colouring the heifers that failed on that criteria. Now we can extend this rule across to all of ours by simply just changing our range rule to incorporate all the way to G. So now we've got B3 to G40, and that's I've just clicked in another cell to make that happen. And we've now got basically all of the heifers being highlighted depending on which criteria they fail. Except the only thing we've got a problem with there is the mature cow weight is we're looking at values greater than rather than less than or equal to. So I'm just going to change that from G to C so we get the first two columns and put a comma in and put a second range to apply this to, which is E3 colon G40. So now we've actually specified two ranges to apply this formula to. And so we can say we've got that working on everything except for mature cow weight. Click done. You can see that this rule we've got over here applies to this range and this range. Jump in mature cow weight and we'll kind of do the same thing but in reverse. Add a rule greater than or equal to, make it red. And again, we start with an equal sign and we want column D and the absolute value of row 1. And there we have it. So now what we can see in our list is that we've got heifers here that fail on one criteria. These are worth reviewing to see, do I really want to cull this heifer based on one criteria? This one's got excellent calving ease direct, excellent growth, small mature cow weight, great rib fat, awesome IF. I'm thinking maybe I don't want to cull that heifer just on the basis of the EMA, but these are the decisions you can make. You can use your discretion as you go. Other heifers fail on multiple criteria. And this one's got two problems. Put a little frozen paint up there so our headings stay. So I can see that this heifer fails on EMA and rib fat. This heifer fails on yearling weight, a single trait. Here's a heifer that fails on 3 traits. So another really useful snapshot on deciding whether your cull list is has got the right heifers in it. I think I'll leave that there for now. You could easily duplicate this sheet and reverse it to build a retained list of heifers that you're retaining, but you can do that in angus.tech anyway. Thanks a lot for listening. I'm going to share this spreadsheet on Google Sheets so anyone can access it to make a copy, and give me a bell if you've got any questions or got any other ideas. Thanks for listening.